I mentioned before the news that came to us starting 36 hours ago, and I can't help but think of a line from Shakespeare from Much Ado About Nothing. The context is completely different, but the meaning, it will be clear. Oh, what men dare do, what men may do, what men daily do, not knowing what they do. Once again, weeks of sermon writing out the window because things have changed in the world. But the readings for today stayed the same. I'll share with you Sauber's closing lines. But the wisdom of my tribe quickly kicked in. They knew all too well that if fear rules, the hay will rot and the cows will vanish. I learned from these fearless people that there are daily decisions that we can make to exercise our muscles against being afraid. So I have some things I'm going to say, but what I want us to all be thinking about is what might those daily exercises be that will keep us being as minimally afraid as possible. I started thinking back to my first day as the associate minister in Columbus, Ohio. Mark Bellatini, who some of you know, had long lauded. He tried to do his best to sell me on what a great place Columbus was. He called it the Paris of the Midwest. I've been to Paris. That comparison is an exaggeration, but Mark is Italian and he's prone to exaggeration, so you know. He also told me that he would take me on his world-famous tour of Columbus to show me the town. And being Mark, that included quite a while at the bookstore that was closest to the church we were both working in the poetry section. He had some things he was looking for, but he also wanted to know what poets I read, and he wanted to make sure I knew of one poem from a poet, Galway Kinnell. These were those lines from his poem, Kinnell's poem, Flying Home. Love is very much like courage. Perhaps it is courage, and even perhaps only courage. Now that's a short part of a longer, beautiful poem. In the last 36 hours, we have learned of Operation Epic Fury, or what many are calling Operation Epstein Fury. And when I got up this morning, this is what the historian and deep thinker Heather Cox Richardson had to say. Scholar of authoritarianism, she quotes here Timothy Snyder, noted in his recent post that Trump's personal corruption is another interpretive framework for thinking about his decision to go to war. Trump's sudden foray into regime change after years of attacking other presidents who tried it raises the question of whether he is acting for other countries in the Middle East he considers his allies. And here she quotes Timothy Snyder, given the stupefyingly overt corruption of the Trump administration, I'm not holding anything back, folks, this morning. One might ask whether the United States Armed Forces are now being used on a per-hire basis. Snyder noted that the Gulf Arab states, eager to curb Iran's power, have generated, and I'm quoting again now, generated extremely generous packages of compensation for companies associated with Trump personally and with members of his family, using our armed forces as mercenaries for hire. I remember during Trump's first presidential administration, a teen of the congregation I served who was homeschooled and homebound due to a serious medical condition. He wasn't really socialized, but He read science fiction and comic books like no one else. If I had any question about any science fiction or DC or Marvel character, he was the guy. And he said about Trump then, doesn't he know about good and evil? Didn't he ever read comic books? I love that. Now, as Diane mentioned earlier, last Sunday we had a meeting for us to talk to one another, members of this congregation, about what we hoped for as the future of this congregation, and also what we treasured most about being part of this religious community. There were 4 questions that were posed, and the hardest one, it was this, that what a possible future for Starr King would most break your heart. People leaving, the loss of community here, staff leaving, don't. And what became clear to me, and the group of 4 of us who were organizing this just met on Friday afternoon to begin going through all the responses, and it was pages and pages. We will have more to report back to you in coming weeks, but what became really clear to me is that most, if not all of you, have had a friend named Bill here reaching out his hand to you when you needed someone to reach out their hand to you. Now, what I didn't say earlier, because the time was getting on, is that gesture of my friend Bill's, taking my hand when I was turning green and was scared, was one of the gestures I have most clearly remembered in my entire life. That's one of those things that stays with me. And I can only imagine and frankly assume that the gestures you have seen heading to you, a hand outstretched, are gestures that you will never forget as well. This is a congregation that loves one another. And if you're a newcomer, that may sound like, it's okay. They take things at your own time. Now, this morning, I was set to talk about something called the Sermon on the Mount, which is the title, I was told, that somehow came to this congregation when ministers would talk about the pledge drive and the generosity in the congregation. The minister would offer the Sermon on the Mount. And that's an ironic title because the amount is not the goal of our pledge drive. Now, the pledge drive will start in earnest 2 weeks from today on March 15th, the Ides of March. Scary date, but we'll be all right. Because there's the goal, what we're hoping for, is not a specific dollar amount, which every other church I've served has had. You guys do it different. What you want is everyone to make a pledge, no matter what that is. And so the Sermon on the Mount really isn't. It's the sermon about let's be generous together. Now, I want to read one other thing. What Mark didn't know in the poem that he shared with me, Galway Kinnell's poem, Flying Home, is a poem he wrote reflecting on an intercontinental flight back to his love. And he's thinking about being far away and coming home. And what Mark didn't know is that the most impactful thing of literature that I have ever had is from a little book by a guy you may remember the name of, Wendell Berry. He's a writer and farmer in Kentucky. And this is a little book called Remembering. And the main character here, Andy, is a farmer from Kentucky who lost his hand in a farming accident, and so now works in agribusiness. And he's in San Francisco for some conference or something. And the novel is him, before he left, he and his wife had a really big fight. and he's worried about going home. Is she going to be there? And the remembering takes place. He can't fall asleep the last night in San Francisco, and so he wanders the city. Remembers being there for the first time when his father took him to a San Francisco jazz club, and he had no idea how his farmer dad from Kentucky knew about San Francisco jazz, but he did. And I got to find the right page or I'll give you something wrong. To Andy, the air is an element as dangerous to the mind as to the body. For wingless creatures, it is an element of abstraction, abstract distance and speed, abstract desire. Flight seems to him to involve some radical disassemblement, as if one may pass through it only as a loose suspension of particles, threatened with dispersal. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We want to welcome you aboard and thank you for flying with us. We're ascending now to our cruising altitude of 37,000 feet. Our route today will take us approximately over Denver, Indianapolis, and then on down to Cincinnati. Cincinnati's airport is in Kentucky. Don't ask me why. Our flying time will be, about 3 hours and 53 minutes. As soon as we have reached altitude, your cabin attendants will be around with complimentary beverages and lunch. So settle back, folks. Enjoy your flight. 37,000 feet is over 7 miles. How long would it take to fall 7 miles? He thinks of falling 7 miles and knowing that one is falling. Flight has always returned him to the ancient desire to die at home. He does not want to die in some place of abstraction or in a fearless heap in some place he has never even seen. But he fears most his body's brutal fear of falling through the high and alien air and knowing it. He imagines the moment before the crash when the body, remembering its long familiarity with itself, would find it strange. His hand, the one removed, that had imagined many things, had never imagined its absence. He wonders if he were going down, would the young woman sitting beside him be willing to hold his hand? He looks at her covertly, wondering. Holding hands, they would go down through the miles of air and crash into their absence from the earth forever. She catches him looking, lifts her chin a little, and tugs down the hem of her skirt. Now you've done it, he thinks. You'll have to crash by yourself. Thus endeth the lesson. Oh, what men do. Our goal is everyone's participation. In the language that I inherited here to close each service are the lines, we're here because we need one another. Nothing truer is ever said from the pulpit. The Sermon on the Mount isn't about a mount. It's about us being here, reaching out our hands to one another and holding fast. Thank you, one and all. Thank you.